Yes, good afternoon everyone. Thank you. Terima kasih teman-teman yang sudah hadir tadi di workshop 3 Social Mobility. Next session would be panel discussion 4, titled Reimagining Learning Through Creativity and Innovations. Yep. So this is very interesting topics, and what a wonderful sessions, because very interesting. In a world that is changing faster than ever, creativity is no longer just a nice to have skill. It becomes essentials. It's become fundamentals, and how we solve the problems, how we think toward the world. And we are truly honored to be joined by true extraordinary speakers here. Professor Bo Stjerne Thomsen, Head of Educational Impact at Lego Educations, and Ruby Healey, Senior Studio Manager at YLab. Together, they will share their perspective on how creativity, play, and learn-centered approaches can genuinely transform the education. I encourage all of you to stay curious, take notes, turn on your camera, and think about how these ideas. And please prepare your questions, because we're having a interactive times at the end of the sessions. Feel free to share on your network. And yes, after this panel ends, we will continue to the interactive workshop with Kria Global. So without further ado, please join me in a meeting our moderator for this session, Hansa Khalisa. Please, Hansa Khalisa, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Adan. Hi, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang, good morning, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. To our friends in Denmark, it's just gone breakfast. In Jakarta here, we just wrapped up our lunch, and maybe in Melbourne, the workday is wrapping up. But wherever you are, welcome to ICEF 2026. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kansa Kalisha. I hold a master's degree in education. I currently work as an education advisor to the Coordinating Minister of Human Development and Culture of Indonesia. And I'll be moderating the session for the next hour or so. Okay, so a lot of you today has came to learn more about the education systems and also the solutions that we can give from different perspectives. And we all know that there are a lot of education problems in the world and the systems right now. Now, a lot of the easy reaction is to ask for more money, more tablets, more buildings. But here's the tension that this panel exists to break. The World Economic Forum tells us that nearly 40% of the skills we teach today will be obsolete by 2030. And that 4 of the 5 fastest growing skills for the future workforce are not technical at all. They're creative thinking, resilience, curiosity, and the ability to keep learning. So we have a system optimized for standardized tests in a world that's increasingly paying for imagination. That's the gap. And the premise of today is radical in simplicity. Closing it does not require a high-tech lab or a big budget. It requires creativity, a tool every single teacher in this room already owns. So for the next hour, treat this less like a lecture and more like a toolbox, because right after us, you'll head into workshops to build the real thing. And to do that, I have 2 people who've spent their careers turning that premise into evidence. First, we have Professor Bo Stjerne Thomsen, Head of Educational Impact at Lego Education. Bo has over 20 years experience in education and learning innovation. He has collaborated with global institutions and initiatives to enhance the creativity, engagement, and impact of learning. And joining him, we have also Ruby Healey, Senior Studio Manager at YLab Australia. She'll be sharing her insights on reshaping learning spaces during this panel discussion. So without further ado, I want to give the floor to Bo, as he will open the session with a keynote about learning to play. Professor Thomsen, the floor is yours.
Absolute. Thank you so much. And this is hello from early morning in Denmark. That was such a wonderful framing. What you're doing seems to be exactly spot on what we need in this world right now. More creativity, more focus on community, and more focused on helping students develop agency and an exciting environment for teachers to teach. So I'm very delighted to be part of the Community Education Festival here. And there's so much to learn for me too. I've been working across more than 50 countries, working first in the research space for many years, then in the foundation where we have been developing programs, also in Indonesia, and now heading impact in Lego Education to scale opportunities for educators to do more hands-on, actively engaging, joyful learning opportunities, which I'll share much more about now. So let me get to the framing here. So let me know if you can see the slides here.
Yes, perfect.
Great. So learning through play means that some of the most critical skills that was just mentioned here are actually developed through play. But the bonus is that you also get more engaged students and you are actually able to develop your educational approach in a way that you have a deeper understanding of the knowledge and the curriculum. So it sets you up towards a future that it's much more about both knowledge, skills, and engagement. And I'll share with you a few examples that we can go deeper into a little later. So basically, our vision for what the 2030, the future looks like, is much more positioning learning through play. So across our LEGO entities, we want to support a force for learning through play, a community, examples worldwide, because we are taking an active position that play has been undervalued in developing these types of skills that were just mentioned here. And we actually have the specific mechanism for doing so. So our starting point is also to remind ourselves that kids are naturally curious, naturally scientists. They're coming into the world to explore it. And they ask, what if, and how might we, and so forth, right? So they have this really flexible, open mindset. And as we grow older, we actually become less flexible. We are less likely to adopt unfamiliar hypotheses that is consistent with new evidence. So what it means is, even if we are presented with evidence or examples that seems to be better than our previous experiences, we are unlikely to adopt these. But children say, oh, that seems like an interesting pattern. How might I do this? So there's so much to learn from that open-mindedness of children. And it's also based on research and theories we have worked on for more than 40 years when we started our first collaboration with MIT. And I'm a research affiliate with MIT. I'm a professor in Denmark, and I'm a visiting professor in China also. And this mindset around children learn best when they can actively construct and make things that are personally meaningful is very much on top of mind, not only for agency and supporting students' passion, but actually because it's a more effective way of learning. And that's what I'm going to share a little bit now. So when we think about learning through play, it's a few simple things that are in that process. And it's highly documented over the past 15 years in our research. So what it means is that children are not individually competitive, working alone. They're socially interactive. We're establishing a collaborative, community-based environment where students help each other. It's actively engaging, not passive. It means they have choices. They are actively exploring ideas, working with materials, not sitting passively looking into the classroom. It's joyful, it's not sad. It's meaningful, something they can relate to. And it's iterative. It means they try a few different solutions. So I'm very proud to see when I look at Indonesia, it's actually what you are beginning to strive for right now. You have it in the government, in the policies, you're looking to support among teachers. And the difficulty is to get to implementation. What are the practical ways of doing so? But the research is very clear from a types of play, from the neuroscience, from the play facilitation, which are some of the reports we did early on, how it works in school, how it works with technologies, and how you bring the community and parents along. So I'll invite you to also look at these background research later if you're interested. As was mentioned, we are in a world where there's very different skills, and we all acknowledge that. I just want to re-emphasize that when we did the World Economic Forum Future of Job study, and when I was in the Education 2.0 group at World Economic Forum, it was around 2018-19 before COVID. And when we came to 21-22 after COVID, we realized these are not really only skills we talk about. They are fully real. We have to relate to it. This is actually what is happening right now. When I'm in my work, when I speak to both communities and companies around the world, they are looking for resilience. They're looking for employees who have creative thinking, empathy, and curiosity. This is the most crucial. Our challenge is, if we look at how skills are developed in education right now, these are the lowest correlated to education. These are the ones that we least support right now. We might have a lot of focus on digital literacy and programming, and there's some aspects of driving motivation. But if you look at creativity, empathy, self-confidence, coping with uncertainty, these are the least supported right now in education. The other situation is we actually have a rich set of evidence that play can develop these types of skills holistically. More than 350 research studies across 40 countries, including Indonesia, describes how we can support both cognition, like focused attention, working memory, numeracy and literacy, but also creative, physical, emotional, social competency through play. And it's also in school. It's not only preschool. So the evidence exists. For us, it's really important that learning comes with actively engaging hands-on experiences. There's a lot we can use technologies for, but there's such a rich evidence and more than 3,000 research papers that look at the importance of bringing in physical materials, real-life experiences, using the outdoor, using a variation of different ways to express yourself, and particularly because physical materials gives you an understanding of spatial cognition, and has an impact on a range of different academic subjects. But it's also a prediction of STEM-related careers, so into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But this ability to represent your ideas in many different ways, use many different materials, is critical for the learning process. And when we ask educators, they say, well, students are most engaged doing hands-on activities. 9 out of 10 in our global study here said, well, this is how we support engagement. Students seem to be tuning out. They might be thinking about different things. Some even might still have phones or technologies. The way to engage students is to help them build and make things together. And at the same time, 8 in 10 teachers say it's also where you give the support for future-ready skills like creativity, curiosity, and teamwork. It's through that kind of real-life materials. So what are the strategies to teach that? So we have been operating in many years in kind of a opposition between direct instruction and free play. And in our research, we recognize that both of these are very important. You need to have free play, to have independence, to go out and do your sports and have free time, have own choice and freedom to explore. We also need direct instruction for some things, to set direction, to align outcomes, to make sure there's an environment where we understand what we are here for. But actually, the greatest benefits exist in the middle spectrum. It's not where there's a teacher only instructing and then going to free play, but it's in that space of guided play and some aspects of games. What we are focusing on is all the research around guided play. It actually brings greater benefit, both to collaboration, to creativity, but also to learning outcomes, because it allows you to focus on what the outcomes are, but gives support in terms of agency, creativity, and collaboration. The way we can observe that in the classroom is we have a very simple rubric we use, which we have tested and applied across many different countries. If you look at the different characteristics at the top part of this rubric, joyful, actively engaging, iterative, meaningful, and socially interactive, you can also see how you can focus and observe the states of play in the vertical left side here. We don't want to see non-play. We don't want to see unhappy, sad children not allowed to engage, just doing the same thing over and over again. That's not a classroom that is conducive to engagement and learning. We can have passive instruction sometimes, like when we start out lessons, children might be, or students might be neutral. They might be following a few instructions. They might be doing it because they have to, because, public education is mandatory. But it's a space we have to spend our time minimal in, like 5 to 10% of the time in a lesson. And then we can go to games if they want to test out a few skills. It's an opportunity to explore possibilities, to try a few skills, to figure out a few domains. But where we want to get to increasingly is around the guided, where they choose their own path. They're focused, they adjust, they develop their understanding, they work with others. And eventually we can get to the open-ended real-life opportunities in our education systems where they are completely invested because they drive the changes they want to make. They make the experiences relevant to themselves. They play with others collaboratively. This is not a classroom that needs to be at the deeper end, the lower end all the time, that can be exhausting. But we have to have an experience to dive up and down in this spectrum here, because then they learn better, they remember better, they apply the skills better, and they are more self-directed to be lifelong learners. So we know how that looks like. It actually exists. It's what you are doing in many classrooms around the world. It's just not the main practice because it's difficult to facilitate. But when I looked at the studies, I investigated 60 different pedagogies all across the world. And these came up as the ones that have the greatest impact, but also ability to facilitate. So inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, problem-based learning. So you dive into a deeper question like inquiry that you're really excited about. You dive into a problem you really want to figure out. You do a project that you want to present, you want to illustrate, you want to make a difference in the world, or you do collaborative learning where you work together with others, experiential learning where you go out and visit a community, a partner, but all of these active learning methodologies. And this paper that I did in 2022 together with colleagues in Australia actually is the most read research paper in the frontiers of education in 22. Now we have 500,000 people reading a paper about play at school. I think that's remarkable that it's actually growing as a practice that can be implemented. So we're doing that in Lego Education. I have a few examples. We've done that for more than 40 years. Part of the idea about play is seriously if you bring attention to the materials and the processes. And right now we have it both from an education science perspective, computer science and AI. I'll just give you a few examples from science. So what happens here is when you think about these curriculum approaches, what you do is you design for the outcome still. You design for the learning objectives, but then you create a creative and collaborative process that allows students to express this in many different ways. So here we have 3 different set of materials aligned to curriculum, but it's based on guided inquiry. And it follows a methodology that everyone knows and is aware of, but we have structured it a little more so it's easier to relate to in other projects and materials also. We spent roughly 2-3 slides, 5% of the time in a 45-minute lesson on engaged states. It's one big question that sparked curiosity, setting the context. Then students go in and explore. They actually do that in groups of 4. So they take one particular subject or domain, and then they build a little model of that kind of domain. I'll come back to an example. They predict and try, and they share that after around 10-15 minutes to the rest of the group. Then they explain that, and then they go to an open-ended project. Then they try to combine materials in a new way to describe how can they articulate that kind of science experiment, language, mathematics in a different way. Because the more different solutions you have to illustrate that domain, the better you understand it. And then they share the projects later. So the methodology here illustrates that the teacher is still controlling the outcome and the curriculum. And when you get to sharing the projects at the end of the 45-60-minute lesson, you have so many different examples of how that domain comes to life through projects. So you still follow and achieve the domain outcomes. So what it requires is materials and curriculum that teachers can be inspired by and follow. So we come with a free portal of all kind of content. So no matter if you have Lego bricks or not, here are 120 examples of lessons that people can look at and download and apply to other materials also, but really following a scripted approach where you have the slides available. And that's important because one of the main barriers to implement project-based, problem-based, design-based, design thinking and so forth is the preparation. So we have made the preparation for teachers so they can more easily get started. And here is a more detail of how that preparation look like. It's 10 standard slides. It gives a few prompts to each of the phases. And it also gives some support to how you facilitate it. What if there's conflict in the classroom? What if some children may not understand, may not be as engaged, or others are further ahead? Then this gives opportunity to adapt. But it's basically a simplified, child-friendly structure where students are truly engaged. It's meaningful to them. So here's an example. We have a learning design team, researchers, content developers, designers who really care for making serious topics child-friendly. Here, imagine a little model that teaches about earth science. And this is an earth science around the impact of earthquakes, which is a really serious issue, many different parts of the world. And how do you introduce that to children? I know in Indonesia it's a big challenge. We actually had an earthquake in Copenhagen, believe it or not, just 2 weeks ago. But here it's introduced to say students will create and compare solutions to reduce the impact of earthquakes. But the question comes, you're out this sunny morning, you are going to prepare a lemonade stand for your neighbors. But suddenly an earthquake strikes and your lemonade is all over. How would you then redesign your lemonade stand so it can sustain the effect of an earthquake? So we have a little motor, controller, sensors here. You make a little experiment and the lemonade fall on the floor and the students now have to redesign it. So what students do is they generate many different solutions to that example, to that earthquake, so they can describe and talk more about the impact of earthquakes. So these are just other examples, many different ways of explaining where do animals live, build the environment, talk about what different spaces different animals need. Fire and horns is a genetic exercise. Here's how you're building how two different parents give birth to a baby dragon. How would that dragon look like? What are the kind of traits they inherit from their parents in the offspring, and what are the particular ways we can think about genetics? And here's very simple ways in thinking about the physical body and how we react, the brain reacts to impulses from the environment. So this is a little motor that reacts to when you're getting in close proximity to it. And you talk about sensory receptors and how stimuli is responded in the brain. So the main concept is many different examples. There's a clear learning outcome. You build a little model, a little example. You go test it, and then you build your own ideas, which you share with the class. This is also applied without Lego materials. We have Create and Learn with Anything. It's a global project. I said, what if you had a few different guided examples where students could take any kind of material, cardboard, the things they had in their neighborhood, and then build it into a three-dimensional structure, which they can use to represent the particular domain they're in, mathematics, geography, science, whatever. And they could be supported by a portfolio of activities, but also document what examples they've built. So this can be done as a structure across many different materials. Our passion and our purpose is to nurture a lifelong love of learning, not only for students, but actually also for educators. That educators find that kind of joy and opportunity to engage the whole classroom. In order to do so, we really need to prepare the materials and support them in a way to make it more easy to implement project-based and problem-based in design thinking in the classroom, because it is the best way to learn, but it can be slightly complicated if we don't structure for it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Thompson. That was a wonderful presentation. Very fresh insights as well. I want everyone to hold on to some of your notes because we will come back to the question and answer session later. Thank you. Everyone, please give a virtual round of applause for Professor Thompson. Okay. Thank you, Prof. Thompson, once again. I would like to introduce, we will get back to the questions and answer session later, but I would like to introduce the next speaker, which is Ruby Healey. Ruby is a multidisciplinary designer based in Melbourne and senior studio manager at YLab, a social enterprise that works for young people to design better services, strategies, and campaigns for social change. Through her work in co-design, creative storytelling, and community engagement, Ruby is very passionate about creating more inclusive and participatory futures. And most recently, she collaborated with Merantau, Stories of Indonesian Food and Migration, which is a publication that brings together recipes and migration stories from Indonesian households. She lives in Australia right now, and Ruby will deliver a presentation on learner-centered co-design. So without further ado, Ruby, the floor is yours.
I'm just going to share my screen. One moment.
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, good. Looking good.
Yes.
Okidoki. Alright, halo semua. Terima kasih Kansa untuk perkenalannya. Pasangan saya dari Indonesia, jadi saya belajar bahasa Indonesia. Tapi hari ini saya berbicara bahasa Inggris karena bisa lebih fasih. I'm so grateful to be here today. Thank you to Professor Bo for your wonderful talk. It was so inspiring to hear about learning through play, and I certainly got a lot out of it. I can't wait to apply some of it into my own work as well. I'm convinced that you have the coolest job ever. So, yeah, very cool to share the stage with you. I guess before we get started, I just want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land that I'm tuning in from today in Melbourne. As Hansa mentioned, I've been working on a book with my Indonesian partner about Marantau, about the journeys of Indonesians in Australia. And as part of that process, we've been researching the pre-colonial links between the two places. As early as the 1600s, Macassans came to the top of Australia where the Yolngu people, who are a group of Aboriginal Australians, lived. The Macassans, who were on these shores for the trade of tripang or sea cucumber, they coexisted harmoniously with Yolngu people for hundreds of years. So I just wanted to acknowledge the shared history and also to pay my respect to First Nations elders past and present. So yeah, I guess to link it, I guess I've been reflecting a lot on what we can learn from relationships like this and the relationships that are built through exchange, through collaboration, mutual learning. And that's actually a really fitting way to begin today's topic, which is how we can create education systems that learn with young people rather than simply delivering learning to them. When we talk about innovation in education, we often imagine technology, funding, or entirely new systems. But some of the most transformative educational innovation I've seen has come from one simple shift, treating young people as contributors rather than as consumers. I know many educators here, you're probably working with rigid systems, beholden to testing requirements, maybe with limited resources. But innovation doesn't have to mean blue sky thinking that ignores these realities either. Curriculums and the education system as a whole can take a little while to catch up to the needs of students, but shifting power at a more grassroots level in the classroom can create tangible and more immediate changes in the lives and learning journeys of students. Innovation in education is not driven by technology or systems change alone, but by participation and shared influence. So, for this first section, I am going to talk about co-design and power shifting. But what does that actually mean, and what might that look like in the classroom environment? Well, shifting power in an education setting can be described as redistributing who gets to influence decisions, shape experiences, and define what matters in learning. At its core, it sees learners move from being managed participants in learning to active contributors with agency. So the way students experience education, it's very different to the way adults design it. Young people are the experts of their own learning journeys because they're the ones navigating and interpreting education every single day. As you can see here in this table, like shifting power can look like moving from telling to listening, from control to trust, from excluding to including. There's a few more emotive things like moving from fear to courage because power shifting, it does take guts. Yeah, and I've also put this one here about sort of moving from short-term to long-term thinking. Obviously, young people, they're the inheritors of the future. Therefore, working more collaboratively with them in a learning setting ensures they're actually shaping a future that works for them and a learning journey that works for them as well. I'm talking about all of this power shifting because it's not possible to do co-design without shifting power. It simply can't be done. It's important to acknowledge your own power before you can then shift it as well. So it's sort of that self-awareness. Co-design is a practice we use in a lot of our projects at YLab. And I guess just for context as well, co-design is essentially working with those at the center of a problem to design a solution collaboratively. So really working with those at the heart of something. In an education setting, this might look like shifting the focus from what educators want students to learn to centering the needs of students within that learning. So maybe an example, framing could be rather than asking what do we want students to know, maybe moving towards what problems do students want help solving. So again, really centering their experience within that. Another way of framing it is through this sort of spectrum of engagement. So in a more traditional setting, students, they're receiving information, maybe further along that spectrum, we've got this sort of more emerging method, which is in which students can give feedback. But the gold standard is kind of this sort of co-design method, which in which students can shape processes, questions, and the output. So they're really there for all parts of the process. Of course, it's really easy to talk about these ideas in theory, so I'd like to share a real example of what happened in a project at YLab where we intentionally shifted power to young people in an education setting. A few years ago, actually 2021, so quite a few years ago now, we partnered with Learning Creates, which is a non-for-profit who were exploring how education systems could better recognize the full range of young people's skills, strengths, and capabilities. One of the many challenges, or one of the challenges that they identified was that many young people felt their value was being measured through a very narrow version of success, or a definition of success even. In Australia, pathways after school are often heavily influenced by academic achievement. And while academic achievement is obviously important, many young people told us they had skills, talents, and strengths that weren't being recognized or rewarded. And when young people don't see themselves reflected in the system, it can affect not only the opportunity, but also their sense of agency and their sense of belonging. Now, a traditional approach might have been to ask experts to develop solutions and then seek feedback from students at the end. Instead, we shifted power to the students. So we recruited and trained 19 young people aged 15 to 21 as what we called community associates. Rather than participating in a consultation, they became co-designers, facilitators, researchers, and prototype testers. They gathered insights from their peers, tested ideas in their schools, and helped shape the direction of work from beginning to end. So really embedding them throughout that process. Collectively, we also engaged more than 1,000 young people through workshops, interviews, focus groups, and surveys. And this was all led by those 19 young people as sort of agents on the ground. The role of young people wasn't to have all the the role of adults wasn't to have all the answers. It was to create the conditions for young people's expertise to inform the process. And here's a little cute picture of the project team and all of the young people. This happened during COVID, so we had a lot of Zoom meetings, obviously, and it was a national project. So yeah, this was part of the weekly rhythms that the project team had, and they all got cute little sunglasses on. So love that. What emerged, it wasn't just better data for Learning Creates than Take Forward. It was a deeper understanding of the education system through the eyes of the people experiencing it every day. While the purpose of this project was to inform, the work that Learning Creates does, that ultimately leads to loftier things like education reform, the biggest impact was on the lives of the young people involved. Their experiences were valued, they were listened to, they had ownership over the process, and they were building skills that enabled them to respond and adapt to the rapidly changing future of work. Young people identified barriers that adults had normalized. They challenged assumptions, they tested ideas in real-world settings, and told us when something wasn't working. Importantly, they weren't simply responding to solutions, they were actually involved in creating them. And that's where creativity and innovation become powerful. Not when we're asking young people to engage with our ideas, but when we're creating space for them to generate ideas of their own. For me, the biggest lesson from this project is that innovation doesn't begin with technology, it begins with participation. When young people have genuine influence, they bring perspectives, creativity, and solutions that adults alone cannot generate. And while this project happened at a national level, the principle applies equally in any classroom, community centre, or local learning hub. Every time we invite young people to help define the problem, shape the process, or influence the outcome, we're practicing power shifting. And every time we do that, we're creating the conditions for deeper learning, stronger engagement, and more meaningful innovation. To put it simply, young people are more invested in what they help create. When young people shape learning, motivation increases, so does ownership, critical thinking deepens, participation becomes more authentic, and most importantly, creativity is cultivated. Okay, so I wanted to leave you with three simple approaches to creating innovative classrooms without waiting for system reform that can be implemented regardless of budget, technology, curriculum constraints, all of those things, just some things that you can take into your classrooms or wherever. The first is connecting learning to issues that matter to young people. So we often ask young people to engage with content before we've helped them understand why it even matters. But relevance is one of the most powerful drivers of learning, whether it's climate anxiety, AI and the future of work, cyberbullying, misinformation, identity, gender expectations, or challenges they're facing in their local communities. Young people are navigating complex issues every day. Rather than trying to connect with young people through things like slang or trends, I think it's much more powerful and way less cringe to connect with their lived experiences. When students can see, when students can see what they're learning, and how that relates to the world around them, learning feels less like an abstract exercise and more like a tool they can use to understand and shape their future. But most importantly, ask students what matters to them. The most relevant issues are often the ones that we don't think to include ourselves, and that's super important to just ask. The second is creating opportunities for low stakes creativity. Creativity doesn't thrive in environments where people are afraid of being wrong. It thrives in environments where experimentation feels safe, and it doesn't require, these things don't require like a complete redesign of the sense of assessments either. Sometimes it's as simple as encouraging students to prototype rather than perfect, brainstorming groups before sharing publicly, or celebrating what was learned from an idea rather than whether it succeeded. A small example that I really like is changing the question asked at the end of a lesson. So instead of asking who got the right answer, maybe you could ask what changed your mind today. So it's a small shift, but it reinforces curiosity, reflection, and growth rather than correctness alone. And those are exactly the conditions that support innovation in education. The final approach is moving from simulation to active contribution. We've already spoken about how young people often disengage when learning feels disconnected from their reality. The format assessments take is another opportunity to link the everyday reality of students with their learning. Instead of writing an essay that only a teacher will read, could students write to local government or to a local community figure? Instead of designing a fictional campaign, could they create something for a real audience? Could they interview community members, redesign a school process, map accessibility issues in their neighborhood, or create content that educates their peers? These activities don't require expensive technology or a major curriculum reform, but they do give young people an opportunity to practice influence and see that their ideas can have impact beyond the classroom. When young people experience themselves as contributors rather than consumers, learning becomes more meaningful. Okay, I'd like to leave you with one final thought. Young people do not need adults to manufacture creativity in them. They are already creative. What they need are environments where curiosity, contribution, and experimentation are safe and encouraged. When we shift power, even in small ways, we create opportunities for young people to develop agency, confidence, and most importantly, ownership over their learning. If young people only ever practice compliance in education, we shouldn't be surprised when they struggle to practice leadership, participation, and innovation later on in their working lives. The future of education does not depend on delivering information more efficiently. It depends on how willing we are to share power with young people. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Terima kasih, Ruby. Everyone, can we give like a virtual reaction and round of applause for Ruby as well? Thank you very much. I like how you end the note with by saying that children are inherently already creative. We just need to create that ecosystem to empower them, to give them the agency, the confidence, and the support that they needed to, to express that creativity. Thank you, Ruby. So
Thank
we
you so
already
much.
heard two wonderful presentations, and I'm sure a lot of questions are already swimming in your head. So I would like to start with a few questions first, but then I will give the floor to Darlene to moderate the question and answer session. Is that all right with everyone? Okay, perfect. I have a question for both Professor Thompson and also Ruby, because it was interesting how we all agreed that learning is most effective through active engagement and also creativity and all that. But as we know today, we live in an era where the AI is rapidly reshaping education and also childhood experiences, right? So do you believe that children should be introduced or interacting with AI at the very early age? And how might it disrupt or even support learning through play, particularly in areas where creativity, curiosity, and critical thinking is most needed at those developmental ages? So maybe that would be my first question to Prof. Thompson and also Ruby.
Absolutely. That is certainly the question most people are thinking about right now, and it's very important for us to get this clear. And I, as an educator and researcher, and also from the Lego company, we have very strong principles around this. We have designed a whole new computer science and AI curriculum from children from kindergarten to grade 8 to introduce AI literacy. So what we do is that we strongly believe that children should not download things in an unsafe environment without the support of adults. No materials from students should be uploaded to anywhere on the internet. But at the same time, we then need to create a safe environment where they can try things out. So our materials are designed to be completely safe and without interference with AI, Indians, and so forth. But that being said, there are really good and creative ways we can introduce technology. So if we design for the learning outcomes we are talking about, there are actually ways to integrate Gen AI and other features into the learning process. So for instance, if you come to following the learning science, following the creative processes, there are ways where the Gen AI and technologies can be controlled by the teacher in the classroom. And you start with open-ended questions. For instance, there's a big project in US right now where they're trying to help educators relate curriculum to children's lives. Just to give an idea from an educator point of view, how do I get the science curriculum or math curriculum to something that is in the context of this age group or this interest? So the AI helps basically the child or the teacher relate abstract concepts to initial ideas for children, just as a starting conversation, because AI doesn't know about children's interest, but it knows a little bit about the connections. It could also be AI used to consolidate many of the projects that the children are sitting with. So not giving information about the children, but the particular physical projects they're sitting with. So opportunity to observe and orchestrate and document and then share with the classroom to get ideas. So there are many different ways Gen AI and technology can be used if you follow a good creative learning science approach in the classroom and it's in the control of the teachers. But essentially, where children learn is through active engagement, physical materials, collaborative and creative environments.
Thank you, Prof. Thompson. That was wonderful to hear. The emphasis on considering the ethics of the use of AI from the end-to-end process of learning, also teaching, is very important, since we also have a lot of educators in this room as well. Thank you. Ruby, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, I guess I feel like you really covered it, so I'm not sure how much more I have to add to it. But I think just from my perspective, like I work a lot with sort of, I guess more teenagers and sort of outside of the education setting, but just from general sentiments from young people and AI. There's so many mixed feelings going on, and I work with a lot of young people who are just like don't even want to touch it because it's like they just feel like it stifles their creativity and is, giving them putting words in their mouth, that kind of thing. And then I work with other young people who they solely rely on it. So there's a real and I guess maybe what I'm trying to say through that is you can't control how people will use it as much as you put parameters in place. I think it's really difficult to control the way that young people interact with it. I think and I guess that's why, learning through play and the topics that I was talking about in my talk are so important, that it comes back to creativity and play, which are things that can't be controlled by AI, I think. So yeah, sorry, that's not a particularly astute answer, but basically, yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it there.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you, Ruby. I
Can I?
will.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry. Can I just add? Because I
of
think I
course.
just forgot. Actually, we did a big study on how educators and students are looking at technology, and there's a little video I shared because I think in
Okay.
the mindset of what Ruby also did, we actually asked students how would they think about AI, what are the
Yeah.
policies, what are the contributions in the classroom. So there's a very very nice video here that illustrates how it could be done in schools around the world.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with yours as well, Professor Thompson. Thank you, Ruby, for sharing your
And
insight.
maybe off the back of that, sorry, I've got
Yeah.
something
No.
off the back of that too. Like I think you know, it, there's so many, I think it's really important to center young people in these conversations too. It's like, how are they feeling about this? Like,
Yeah.
how are they it's a scary world that they're coming into, and
Yeah.
they don't have any control over it in a way too. So I think, again, just going back to those principles of co-design and power shifting and stuff, like it's incredibly important to
Yeah.
not just be making policies and even policies within schools and stuff about
Yeah.
this, but to be asking students as well, like,
Yeah.
how do you feel? And not just being so reactionary.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important to gain their feedback as well, to like also the learning materials or practices that are being incorporated in classrooms. Thank you for ending the note with that. Thank you, Ruby. Maybe one final question from me is, since there's a lot of educators in this virtual room, and the educators also come from very diverse backgrounds from Aceh to Merauke, right? So a lot of times educators in Indonesia often face issue when the school lacks funding or flexibility or support for innovation. So my question would be, how can a teacher or educator become a catalyst for creativity? Like, what is the first small but powerful action that probably can that you would recommend to the educators here that would give a lasting like shift in how students learn and think?
I
So,
think if I start, is that okay, Ruby? I think Ruby did a really good example of how you invite students in to the
mm,
conversation. So I think the examples of the power shift for me is also you actually give more agency and invite students to think about that curriculum or that learning objective. So try to take that learning objective and outcome you absolutely have to achieve and
yeah.
turn it into an open-ended question and say, how might we explore different ways that earthquakes works? How might we explore different ways that I can find this math curriculum in the environment around you, in the classroom, outdoor? How might I think about different places? So share that uncertainty, a curiosity with your children,
Mm,
even at young children. We've seen that. Then, of course, it's also about that uncertainty to share with your colleagues to find examples around it, because most of this work is actually not necessarily whether you can achieve the outcomes or not. It's your own opportunity to take a few small risks and acknowledging that learning is a process where you test and try out different ideas. And it's not necessarily easy to make a big shift, but you can invite the students to reflect on how you represent this particular objective and materials in many different ways. So we have obviously looking at this more operationally and say you
yeah.
start with the learning objectives, but we're all on that journey and invite students to collaborate on that and represent it in different ways.
Thank you, Prof. Thompson. What do you think, Ruby? Is there any way that a teacher could, provoke the children to be more creative when the teacher itself is faced with a lot of hurdles or obstacles centered around resources within the school?
Yeah, for sure. I guess Yeah, it's almost as simple as just asking like where do you like, instead of like having a learning objective, which is like, I don't know, memorize this concept or whatever. It's kind of just coming back to asking like where do you see this issue in your own life?
Mm.
Um, you know, where do you see this in your community? Like, does this matter in your community
Yeah.
right now? What would you change about this system or something? So it's kind of just those little questions.
Yeah.
They're small, but I think they can have a really big impact.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't have to reinvent the wheel and be this massive thing. It's kind of just
Oh.
asking those little questions that gives that agency to young people and gets them thinking about themselves and where they fit in society and their community and everything, increasing that sort of civil participation by proxy as well. Yeah.
Mm. Thank you, Ruby and Prof. Thompson, for sharing your insights about how children could be co-designers of their own classrooms. I think those were very, very insightful. I will leave my questions here since I don't want to take all the airtime for all the educators here already prepared with their beautiful questions. So I will pass on the mic to Darlene. But before I give the mic, I would like to thank Prof. Thompson and Ruby for delivering very powerful and impactful presentations today. Really grateful to see you all today, and hope we can, hope we can network after this. So that's all from me. Thank you, and I will pass on the mic to Darlene.
Thank you, Kansa.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear my voice? Hello. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, it's
Yes.
clear.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so everyone, hello. My name is Darlene, and I'm going to be leading the Q&A session with all of you guys. And I saw here that there are already some people who are raising their hands. I think everyone is so excited to ask Professor Thompson and also Ruby about this education and creativity and also innovation. So I will pass on to the first person, which is Kak Ega here. Hello, Kak Ega. How are
Hello.
you?
Hello, darling.
Hello.
Can you hear my voice?
Yes,
Is it
we can
clear?
hear your voice clearly. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good
Yes, please
afternoon, Prof.
answer.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Professor Thompson. Good afternoon, Miss Healy, or can I call you Ruby or Miss Healy?
Ruby's fine.
Okay, Ruby is fine.
Gracias,
Hello.
Boo.
Hello, Ruby. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Liza Megasari. People call me Ega or Miss Ega. I'm a teacher at SLB, Sekolah Luar Biasa. It's state special needs school in Binjai City. Actually, it's a town, not Sumatra province. Yeah. So I live in Sumatra Island, yeah, one of the biggest island, one of 5 biggest island in Indonesia. And in this festival, I represent the one of professional teacher organization called KGBM. It's like a national learning teacher community. There's a lot of my friends here in this Zoom meeting. And Professor Thompson, Ruby, I'm very interested and amazed in both of your choice of words. In Professor Thompson choice of words, the power to engage. And what Miss Ruby choice of words, power shifting. There's two kind of powers, and I believe we all here, we all in the world need those two powers. I think a lot of people will agree with me. So I think what we discuss in this Zoom meeting is about the shifting between the old approach. For analogy, for example, teachers, were like tailors with students as clients. Perhaps the government was the designer. Teachers and students were simply implementers, just do what someone up there asked them to do. But in this today's discussion, there's a student agency approach where teachers are designers and students are co-designers. Participation and collaboration are very important here. Very, very important. So what my question is, what do you think? What your Miss Ruby Healey and Professor Thompson, what do you What both of you think about student agency in inclusive education? How does it relate to gender equality, disability, and social inclusion in the world right now, which digital tools, application, AI, and modern technology? Please give both of you from your experience, or what do you think about that? Thank you.
Thank you, Haiga. And maybe I can pass this to Professor Thompson first, and then maybe after that, we can also share her thoughts.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. And Iga, that's very relevant for someone who is in the classroom every day. So I'll share three different thoughts. First one, when we think about engagement, is about essentially children and students to grow up to be self-directed learning. So engagement is not only being active and busy, doing things, but it's that they drive their own learning process. So that's why we have this observational framework that I shared, and I'll share the link to it also. It is essentially small shifts that they are driving the process. They are reflecting metacognition and working with others. So that's kind of the first definition of engagement. The second thing is, in order to do so, the big change is actually not a huge shift, because the big challenge is students think that they need to learn passively. There are actually many students who are not used to taking decisions or having agency, because you have this idea about education, you have to sit still, you're being taught to and not contributing. So it's actually also a change journey for students, as much as it's a change journey for teachers who need better tools, need different processes. So what we recommend is, again the guided play, guided learning approach. There's a middle spectrum between instruction and free play. And if you look that up in many different examples, it's actually an opportunity where you make a small shift. Learning outcomes are given, support collaboration, do creativity on the outcomes, not brand new ideas. And then the third thing is, which I'm actually very excited to share, around inclusion. We just released a new white paper which combined thoughts and expertise from many different backgrounds around how to create an inclusive classroom. So it includes particular principles of how to support the classroom, differentiate instruction. The main message is there are actually many different ways of doing this. And technology can help, right? Because the way you represent things in many different ways, through materials, sometimes through technologies and so forth, you need it locally owned and driven, not with data shared in the cloud and other places, but it's actually achievable. And there are a few practices to do that. So I'll just share the link here on how you can build inclusive classrooms. And I hope you can dive into it. We will actually be in Australia with it in 2 weeks in Sydney for a big conference at EdTech. But I hope it's also relevant for you in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Thompson, and also for sharing the resource for us to learn. Maybe all of you who are interested in the inclusive education field, you guys can also check it out. And now I'm going to pass it to Ruby.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I wish I was in Sydney to see that, but I would definitely be checking out the white paper. Yeah, I think just maybe I'll focus this a little bit around, future-proofing for learners as well, because I feel like we're all existing in the world, and we all bring different experiences. But one thing that I think we're all facing is obviously just not knowing what the hell is going to happen in the future. And we can't predict it either. So I think focusing less on kind of training students for this one-size-fits-all approach, in which they navigate the world in, this one way, and building them to be more adaptable, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. So teaching students not just how to learn, but teaching students sort of how to learn, not just what to learn, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, I think future-proofing, future-proofing by giving them the skills to navigate uncertainty, basically. So things like collaboration, asking questions, evaluating, communicating ideas, but also adapting after failure. I think that's probably the most important thing. Yeah. Sorry, I don't even know. I kind of blanked the question after that. I was just listening to what Bo was saying. So please tell me if you'd like me to add anything onto that, Ika. It was a really great question.
Yep. Thank you so much, Ruby, and also Professor Thompson for the answer. I hope it already answers the previous person's question. And currently, we're going to move forward to the next person in line, which is Kalisa. Hello, Kalisa, are you there?
Hello, can you hear my voice?
Yes, we can hear your voice. Yes, you
Okay.
can directly ask your questions. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you for the enjoyable presentation, Prof. Thompson and Prof. Healy. I want to ask about the Lego because Prof. Thompson, I have a 7 years old daughter. She loves to play different games, including the Lego. So aside from those benefits that you say about giving the children to play Lego, like spatial, how to spatial learning, uh, is it possible for Lego targeting a specific consumer for the inclusive learning as let's say like autism children who are maybe they play together but not play with each other. So is it one of the objective of Lego how to facilitate those kind of children with the special needs, or maybe is it also targeting the introverted children instead of extroverted? I don't know. Maybe I want to hear your ideas from this kind of opinion because I'm a mother, also a full-time working mother. So maybe you can share your opinion, Professor Thompson, and also with Professor Healy. I learned that you mentioned about how to prioritize problem-based learning and critical thinking for the young people, but um, how do you see their highest level of attachment to the gadget affects the way they elaborate things in education? Because I see that the younger people having more than media social in their life, and but also they are very critical in thinking. How should those two connecting with each other? How do you see it? Is Are they thinking critical because of their interaction with gadget or interaction with artificial intelligence more than us, or is it more to the age of them as well? I think that's my question. I hope that you can get my question very clearly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kalisa. Maybe just to summarize a bit, I think for Professor Thompson, the question is more about can Lego be used towards inclusive education for autism children or maybe children with other special needs, and what are the objectives of that? While for Ruby, I think it's more on like currently learners are having a lot of problem with social medias. They're very addicted to technology and also AI and stuff. So how do you find that balance between like learning and also how do you actually give education to them with the digital technology that we have now? Okay, maybe we can start with Ruby first for now.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, it's a huge thing, and it's also a really interesting thing because we've recently had a social media ban in Australia, and I believe it's happening in Indonesia, right, soon. So it's quite topical at the moment. And yeah, it's definitely, I know that the engagement with social media at a young age does cause many problems and especially safety problems as well. But what we've been finding, the ban came into effect in December. And what we've been finding over the last couple of months is that young people find a way to access things still, and that there's still a lot of really unsafe alternative spaces where young people are being groomed and awful things are happening online. So it hasn't necessarily been a great success, but it would be interesting to see how this plays out. And it's obviously a very early stages of this ban. And will be interesting to see how it plays out in Indonesia as well. But I guess to your point about like critical thinking and young people's engagement with social media and AI and things like that. I do think young people have always been critical thinkers, like throughout eternity, really. And we kind of don't give them as much credit as they deserve, really. But I think there's just I think what's changed and what's different and maybe how it's expressed. When you do have a platform like social media, you can we have access to so much information, right? Like, and especially with AI as well. So you're able to, you're definitely able to be influenced more easily, but you're also able to build that critical thinking and sort of push through that influence as well. So yeah, it's definitely, I don't know if I've answered your question, but I think there's a real correlation between having access to this technology and just, the current state of where we're at now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Ruby, for your explanation. Maybe now we can move on to Professor Thompson as well.
Yes, thank you for a question around Lego materials. I love that. Thank you. But first to say that learning through play is for all children if you structure it into the learning process. And I would say any physical hands-on material is important because whenever children or young people have physical materials, they're more attentive. But it also is easier to support collaboration and creativity because they can represent the world in many different ways. It's easier to share that with their friends sitting in the same room, but also because hands-on materials deepen your understanding of the learning topics. The more modalities, the more different ways you represent the concept, the better you understand it, the better you remember it. For Lego materials, obviously there's a lot of cognitive focus that you gain by Lego materials like attention and problem solving and memorizing, short-term memory. We've looked into spatial thinking because it's math and science. There's also language capabilities. If you represent stories in a book and try to build it and build it in a new way, you understand the language better, you have a better vocabulary. But in terms of then special needs, there's been a huge project running for two decades right now around autistic children. It's called Lego Therapy, originally from Dan Lego at Yale University. It's now called Play Included, which we have supported and worked with for many years. I'll just put it in the chat so you know what I can share as an example. But there are many places around the world where Lego is used for autistic children in the way that sometimes you have a Lego model, but then you orchestrate that building process into three different roles. One is the one who have the building instruction, the other one find the Lego materials, and the third one is going to build. So they keep a focus on what they're passionate about the project they're doing, but then you orchestrate the roles so they actually collaborate around this process, and that has shown tremendous gains. So Lego Therapy, Play Included. We've also taken that to ADHD, and we've taken it to visual impairment like Lego Braille bricks. So it's basically turning a Lego brick into a Braille system for children with visual impairment. There are so many opportunities, not only with Lego materials, but with all kinds of materials, but it needs to be deliberate for the particular needs that the children have and structured around this. And that's why I shared the inclusive report, because it gives many more examples for you to look into.
Thank you for the
I don't hear
answer,
you.
speakers. Thank you.
Maybe it's just me. I think I lost
Hello.
your audio.
Am I audible
now I
now?
hear you again.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Sorry for the technical issue. Next up, we're going to have a question from Kak Jani. Hello, Kak Jani, are you there?
Yes, thank you so much Kak Darlin.
Yes,
Kak
okay.
Darlin, kalau nanti saya bahasa Inggrisnya beribet, minta tolong diterjemahkan ya. So actually, I have a three question, and the first question is I direct to Professor Thompson. So I do believe, and I do believe that learning with the what is that, playing or something is memorable and more effective. But Prof. Thompson, then I think you're aware that a style of learning itu berbeda-beda. Tolong ya Kak Darlin ya, saya lagi capek. Jadi ada pembelajar visual, ada pembelajar audio, dan ada pembelajar kinestetik. Ya kan? So I think cara belajar dengan permainan itu more kinestetik, yang itu mungkin tidak sesuai dengan pembelajar audio atau visual. Then how is it the system that play gini, kadang-kadang orang visual tuh malah terdistraksi dengan cara belajar yang bermain itu. Jadi strateginya bagaimana ketika menerapkan cara belajar dengan permainan itu bisa fit all dengan tipe pembelajar yang tidak kinestetik. Itu pertanyaan untuk Prof. Thomsen. Dan Ruby, can I challenge your bahasa Indonesia with saying telling the question in bahasa Indonesia, or how is it?
You, you know what? You can. I will see how I go responding. But I also appreciate a translation as well to
Right.
make sure
Okay.
that
So
I've
I
got the
think,
message
yeah.
correct.
Yes, thank you. So, Ruby, as a learner center, it is a very ideal, and also the ideal thing will happen in the certain situation, right? So, I think if the classroom is not really big, right, so that will be learner center will be successful because you can give the attention to the whole member, right? But in Indonesia, small class itu adalah luxury, Ruby. You know that we don't always have a small class. Then how to how the learner center will be berhasil ketika itu diterapkan di kelas-kelas yang besar. Dan ketika itu adalah that's one alternative. Then how to accommodate anak-anak yang mungkin ketika anak-anak yang mungkin ketika belajar itu memang perlu waktu atau perlu perhatian khusus. Itu pertanyaan yang besar. Dan yang ketiga, I think I will direct all the question to Prof. Thomsen and Ruby. Maaf ya Kak Darlin kasih tugas banget. Kenapa sekarang kita sungguh sangat terpesona dengan AI gitu ya. For me, seberapa cepat sih kita boleh mengajarkan AI ke anak-anak itu? Karena ini persoalan latah budaya dan gagap teknologi kan. So I think for me using AI itu perlu ada prerequisite condition. Even to my student di universitas, I always tell my student then never play with AI sebelum kamu bisa menulis, sebelum kamu mampu membaca. Otherwise, AI itu akan membuatmu menjadi handicap. So I think here is saya ingin message dari Prof. Thomsen dan Ruby. Seberapa cepat sih kita perlu ngajarin anak-anak itu AI. Jadi jangan merasa kalau nggak ngajarin AI terus kuno. Itu adalah pemikiran yang salah kalau menurut saya. Maaf ya, Darlin, kasih kamu tugas terlalu berat, but thank you so much.
Gak apa-apa.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Kak Jani. Okay, I will try to translate it to Professor Thomsen and also to Ruby, so it'll be clearer. For Professor Thomsen, I think Kak Jani is asking about for Lego. So we know that learners have like different types of learning. Some are learning through visual, some are learning through audios, and some are learning through movements or kinesthetics movements. And by Kajani means she thinks that Lego is more towards the movement type of learners. So how can you implement that if the children is more of a visual learner or more of an audio learner? And what are the implications of that? And the second question for Ruby, I think it's more towards if the classroom is smaller, how do you implement that kind of curriculum where it is still a learner centered? And how do you design a classroom that still has their children participating? Oh, sorry. The classroom is larger actually. If the classroom is larger, how can you implement that into the kids so that they can learn and to be the creator and also participating in the curriculum as well. And the last question is about AI. It's directed to both of you. How early can we actually teach and implement AI into the curriculums of these children? And because Kajani mentioned that she thinks you cannot use AI if you don't have digital literacy if you don't have a good digital literacy skill, because that will just make the learning different and difficult. So how can we implement AI and how fast can we actually introduce AI to the learners and also to the students? I hope I'm getting the questions right. If there are any problems or other questions, maybe you can also type it in the chat below, and I will try to also tell it to Professor Thompson and Ruby as well. Maybe we can start with Professor Thompson on the first question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the questions here. The first one is a slightly tricky one because what you're referring to is that children learn in different ways, like kinesthetically, audio, visual, and so forth, which to some degree is true in terms of you need many different modalities, you need many different stimuli to activate your full brain. If you only see things, that's one modality. If you hear it, if you feel it and touch it. But the research actually has been proven now, and I know that because I worked with Professor Harvard Gardner for many years, been a research affiliate in Harvard University, that being able to separate learners into these different types of profiles is not helpful. So that's not a learner that's only kinesthetic, auditory, or visual, but you all benefit from a combination of these. So the main message really is Lego is only providing like it's very strong at a physical material, but you need to always talk about the material you have. You can turn it into a song by saying, the blue brick represent a particular kind of song or story or tune and so forth. And with many different bricks, you then ask the children to come up with their own songs. So Lego is a physical manipulative, which can then enhance other types of modalities, but they need to be thought of as together. It's most effective to learn when you combine these modalities for children. And most importantly, that it's a pedagogy where the students are guided, they are not being instructed. So children to come up with their own ideas, because then they can apply the modality and dive into the aspects that they prefer or find most effective. The second question around AI is I'll make it shorter. AI can be taught at any age, and I actually mean it. As a 2-3-year-old, that's a little difficult, but as a 5-6-year-old, the research has proven that children think in Bayesian networks. They almost think like data. They orchestrate a lot of information into patterns. So you don't need to teach AI through technology or computers. You can teach AI through materials. So the way we think about it is, if you think about how is knowledge created, how do you take data from different environments? What become truth of an AI who's trying to figure out how does color red look like? How does my face look like? It's different to others. It's actually a conversation you can do with physical materials, without technology, without screens. So you can have conversations around AI literacy that are fundamental to understanding the world around you without technology. And that can be done, in kindergarten. And again, I can show you a link to what we are doing with that. We actually teach computer science and AI from kindergarten to grade 2 without actually using a screen.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Thompson. I think it's very, very interesting to hear that actually we all benefit from all those three methods of learning, from audio, from visual, and also from movement. And I think the most important thing is how do we utilize that and actually combine that to experience the best of learning abilities. And also on the AI side, that means that we can actually teach them from early on. It's just that maybe we need to tweak the materials a bit so we don't actually use the AI, but we actually teach them the principle of AI and the principle of the technology itself. So thank you so much, Professor Thompson. I hope that also answers Kajani's question. And yes, Ruby, please, we want to know your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think I'll just quickly touch on the AI thing before getting into the classroom size stuff. I think like it's building that digital literacy, I think, is the most important thing. So yeah, when you're introducing these tools, it's like as long as that's paired with education around preparedness for, accessing them, I think it can be utilized as a tool. But yeah, that digital literacy is super important. But I also think that young people have way more digital literacy inherently as well. So I think there's, it's a younger person using AI, it's very different to how, someone of an older age might. But I guess to your question about class sizes, like, yeah, it's a really big challenge, and I'm sure many of you are probably facing that. I don't think co-design requires, even though it sort of implies that, young people are at the center of these things and everything, and that everyone's got their spotlight, but that doesn't mean that everyone has like an individualized learning plan or a voice in every single decision, because it's just not possible. And co-design isn't always possible, but there are other things along the spectrum of engagement that can be applied. It's not always about giving students equal airtime either. Like, I know that's not possible either, but it's more so about creating regular opportunities for student influence. So they don't have to sit at the decision-making table every single day, but there might be pathways for student perspective to inform decisions. Yeah, in a class of, say, you've got 40 students, like, it's easier to create participation through smaller groups maybe than through a whole class discussion. So kind of just scaling and adapting depending on, the class at hand and like the numbers that you have. So those smaller groups could offer opportunities for discussion and feedback loops. But I guess on feedback loops too, like, it could be, to ensure that the learning is tailored for students. Maybe there's like an anonymous poll or a little box that you pop your feedback in or something, or people get a chance to do like a 1 minute reflection, or like even a suggestion board if it's like more public or something. Even like little, tiny mechanisms like that, they can make a really big difference in participation, working within the reality that a lot of people have, which is, large classroom sizes and not enough hands or brain power to go to everyone. So, hopefully that answered your question.
Yep, thank you so much, Ruby. So actually, the most important thing is actually adapting those curriculums to fit our system, and also maybe the larger classroom size by scaling it down, and also making smaller groups as well, so it will be easier for them to learn, but still be very hands-on with the learning system. And I think that concludes our Q&A session due to the time restriction. I'm so very grateful for all of you guys who has been very enthusiastic in asking and also learning from Professor Thompson and also Ruby. Please give them a round of applause and also some reactions to show your guys' love to them, because I believe I have gained so many insights from Lego education to co-learner centered design. And I think it's very, very interesting to see. And I hope everyone here, you guys can also get a lot of learnings and apply that in your own classrooms or even your own environment in teaching or learning. And maybe for the closing session, I would like to give it back to Professor Thompson and Ruby to give just one small closing statement for all of us here, maybe one sentence or two to encourage people here to give the best during their learning session. Maybe we can start with Professor Thompson first.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invitation and the great dialogue and the great questions. One suggestion is try to do one new thing every day. Just change a little thing. Just don't need to be radical, but try to adjust that a little bit. You might fail, it might not work, but you've learned so much. But just trying to adjust that little thing every day.
Okay, thank you so much. So learn and just try something new every day. What about you, Ruby?
I think just off the back of what Prof. Thompson said as well, I think trying something new every day and failing, like, that is awesome, because that models to your students that that type of prototyping and stuff is encouraged, and it doesn't have to be, the process is often more important than the outcome, and you don't have to have this like right answer and stuff. So really embodying that and modeling that for your students, I think, is probably one of the key things as well. It's not just, and that's a big part of power shifting too, is sort of acknowledging the power that you have and that you're also not getting it perfect all the time. But I think that's me. Thanks so much. This has been
Okay,
really
thank you
fun.
so
I've loved
much.
this. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much,
much.
Ruby and Professor Thompson. I hope you guys will have a great day ahead. And thank you so much for joining our session. You guys, you can go to your next meeting or next event if you have any. But thank you so much once again. I hope we can stay connected, and I hope we can get another meaningful collaboration in the future. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any more inquiries. And thank you everyone for attending this session. And this marks our last panel session of Indonesian Indonesia's Community Education Festival 2026. So thank you so much. And later on, we will still continue our panel workshop. And please don't leave yet because it's going to be a fun hands-on workshop and we are going to implement what Professor Thompson and Ruby already mentioned and learn about today. And we will have a short break until 3:25 so you guys can feel free to have a drink or grab a snack or go to the toilet and please come back later because we're going to still enjoy and also continue this learning journey with all of you. Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Professor Thompson and Ruby. It's very good to see you and very great to hear from you all.
Kak
Thank
Devin,
Thank
you.
you.
terima kasih banyak.
Terima
You did
Terima kasih banyak ya.
awesome. Terima
Thank
kasih
you.
Ruby, thank you
Terima
Prof. Thompson.
kasih.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.